The political landscape of the United States has always been a focal point of global attention due to its significant impact on international affairs. The hypothetical scenario of Donald Trump's re-election as the 47th president presents a complex picture of potential domestic and international consequences. This video explores the multifaceted impacts of this event, delving into the role of the media, the exploitation of societal fears, changes in domestic policy, the erosion of democratic institutions, and the global influence on international relations. One of the most pressing concerns in the wake of Trump's hypothetical re-election is the role of the media in shaping public perception and discourse. Superficial narratives and overshadowing critical issues. Media outlets often gravitate towards sensationalism and superficial narratives, focusing on aspects like campaign strategies over demographics and election statistics. While these elements are integral to political reporting, an overemphasis can overshadow deeper, more critical issues. For instance, economic discussions frequently hinge on public perceptions rather than empirical realities. Inflation rates, unemployment figures, and gross domestic product (GDP) growth are cited without adequate context, leading to a distorted understanding of economic health. In the months leading up to the hypothetical election, suppose inflation was a dominant concern among voters, with media outlets highlighting a rise of 9% in 2022, attributing this solely to the previous administration's policies without exploring underlying causes, such as post-pandemic supply chain disruptions and recovery efforts from a recession, paints an incomplete picture. By the time of the election, inflation had dropped to 2.4%, unemployment reached its lowest since the 1960s. The GDP growth stood at a robust 3.5%. These positive indicators might receive less attention, overshadowed by narratives of economic hardship. This selective reporting can significantly influence voter perceptions and decisions. Lack of nuance in immigration discussions. Similarly, discussions on immigration often lack nuance and critical examination. Suppose Trump asserts that millions of migrants are crossing the southern border, and these claims go largely unchallenged by the media. In reality, if undocumented immigration had decreased significantly during that period, and comprehensive border security measures were undermined by political actions, their failure to critically examine such claims contributes to a distorted public understanding of key issues. The media's responsibility is to fact-check and provide context, ensuring that public discourse is informed by accurate information. The danger of normalizing undemocratic behavior. Treating abnormal or undemocratic behavior as normal threats democratic institutions. If the media presents Trump's re-election and related controversies as typical political outcomes, it risks desensitizing the public to actions that undermine democratic values. The media should balance reporting with critical analysis to avoid normalizing behaviors that threatens democracy. The re-election of Donald Trump can be attributed in part to the exploitation of deep-seated emotions within the American populace. Over the past few decades, the United States has faced a series of traumatic events that have left indelible marks on the national psyche. Historical traumas and societal scars. Events such as the September 11 attacks, prolonged military engagement abroad, the Great Recession of 2008-2009, and the socio-economic impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic have collectively fostered a climate of fear, anger, and resentment. These events have exacerbated feelings of insecurity, disillusionment with traditional political establishments, creating fertile ground for populist rhetoric. Simplistic solutions to complex problems. Trump's political strategy capitalizes on these emotions by offering simplistic solutions to complex problems, by presenting himself as an outsider willing to challenge the status quo. He taps into the anxieties of those who feel marginalized or left behind by globalization and technological advancements. His rhetoric promises a return to a perceived golden age of prosperity and security, resonating with voters seeking quick fixes to systemic issues. Trump's economic policies focuses on tax cuts and deregulation to boost short-term growth, but these could significantly increase the national debt and jeopardize long-term stability. Additionally, proposed blanket tariffs on imports ranging from 10% to as high as 100% could trigger trade wars and inflation by raising costs for consumers. Another significant concern is the potential politicization of independent institutions, like the Federal Reserve. Interfering with the Federal Reserve's autonomy could undermine investor confidence and disrupt monetary policy. The central bank's ability to manage inflation and respond to economic crisis relies on its independence from political influence. Eroding this independence may lead to unpredictable economic outcomes and hinder effective economic governance. On immigration, policies may become more aggressive, focusing on deportation and strict border controls. Increased efforts to deport undocumented immigrants, including asylum seekers and refugees, raise ethical concerns and risk violating international laws and human rights conventions. Such actions could also have adverse economic effects, as immigrant communities contribute significantly to various sectors of the U.S. economy. Domestic policies might also see shifts in healthcare and social welfare programs. Efforts to dismantle or weaken the Affordable Care Act could result in millions losing access to healthcare. Reductions in funding for social programs could exacerbate income inequality and increase poverty levels, further straining social cohesion. Trump's adversarial relationship with the judiciary, the media, and even members of his own party suggests a willingness to undermine democratic foundations, attempts to delegitimize the electoral process, such as refusing to concede defeat or alleging widespread voter fraud without evidence, erode public trust in democratic institutions. In this hypothetical second term, such tendencies may intensify, posing a significant threat to democratic stability. Consolidation of power and diminished accountability. The appointment of loyalists to key government positions could consolidate power within the executive branch, diminishing the effectiveness of checks and balances designed to prevent abuses of power. This centralization of authority may lead to policies enacted without adequate legislative oversight or judicial review, undermining the principles of separation of powers. The prospect of utilizing executive power to suppress dissent or target political opponents is particularly alarming. Actions such as leveraging law enforcement agencies against cities or deploying the military in domestic affairs challenge the norms of democratic governance and civil liberties. Such measures are reminiscent of authoritarian regimes and contravene constitutional protections. An erosion of democratic institutions may also manifest in restrictions on civil liberties, including freedom of speech, assembly, and the press. The media's role as a watchdog is critical in democracy, and efforts to delegitimize or control the press can lead to unchecked governmental power. Protecting these freedoms is essential to maintaining transparency and accountability. One of the cornerstones of global security is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which is the NATO. Trump's previous skepticism towards NATO, including questioning the value of the alliance and threatening withdrawal, could lead to awakening of transatlantic relations. A diminished U.S. commitment to NATO may embolden adversarial actions by nations like Russia and undermine collective security arrangements crucial for European stability. Trump's approach to the Russia-Ukraine conflict is a particular concern. A perceived affinity for Russian President Vladimir Putin and reluctance to confront Russian aggression could signal a shift in U.S. policy. If the U.S. were to withdraw support for Ukraine, it could lead to Russia consolidating territorial gains, undermining Ukrainian sovereignty, and setting a dangerous precedent of international law regarding territorial integrity. Unchecked support for Israel's actions in Gaza could worsen regional tensions. Close ties with Saudi Arabia and UAE may skew U.S. policy, raising ethical concerns and political worsening humanitarian crisis. Trump's foreign policy often prioritizes bilateral relationships based on personal rapport over multilateral cooperation. This approach could weaken international institutions like the United Nations and marginalize global efforts to address pressing issues such as climate change, pandemics, and economic inequality. The retreat from multilateralism may create a vacuum that other nations like China may seek to fill, reshaping global power dynamics. An inconsistent and confrontational stance towards China could lead to heightened tensions, impacting global trade and security. Trade conflicts may escalate, affecting international markets and economic stability. Additionally, failure to collaborate in global challenges such as climate change and public health hampers collective efforts crucial for addressing these issues effectively.
Undermining international agreements and norms can have long-term detrimental effects on global governance. Withdrawal from international treaties, such as those related to climate change or arms control, weakens the mechanisms designed to manage global challenges. This erosion of international law may lead to increased conflict and instability.
European countries might strengthen intra-European cooperation to mitigate the reduced reliability of the US as an ally. The European Union may take on a more prominent role in international affairs, prompting multilateralism and collective security. This shift requires increased unity among EU member states and a commitment to shared values and objectives. The United Kingdom, having distanced itself from the European Union through Brexit, faces the challenge of redefining its global role. With potential diminishing US support, the UK may need to forge new alliances and trade partnerships, balancing relationships with both the US and the EU. Navigating this complex landscape requires strategic diplomacy and adaptability. Countries led by nationalist governments, such as Hungary under Viktor Orban, may find common ground with Trump's policies. This alignment could further fragment international cooperation on issues like migration, human rights, and democratic governance. The rise of nationalist movements poses challenges to multilateral efforts and enforcement of international norms. Emerging powers may seize the opportunity to expand their influence. Nations like China and Russia might position themselves as alternative leaders in global affairs, promoting their models of governance and international relations. This shift could redefine global power structures and impact the effectiveness of international institutions. Within the United States, reinforcing democratic institutions is paramount. The judiciary, legitimized branches in civil society must act as checks on executive power, upholding the rule of law. Ensuring transparency and promoting accountability are essential to preserving democratic norms. Media organizations bear the responsibility of providing accurate, in-depth reporting. By moving beyond sensationalism and offering nuanced analysis, the media can inform the public and foster informed discourse. Fact-checking and challenging misinformation are critical components of responsible journalism. Globally, nations must adapt by strengthening alternative alliances and recommitting to multilateralism. The European Union and other regional organizations can play pivotal roles in promoting collective action on global issues. Diversifying diplomatic and economic relations reduces reliance on any single partner and enhances resilience. Engaging constructively with emerging powers is crucial. Open dialogue and collaboration on mutual interests can mitigate tensions and foster cooperation. Balancing relationships requires diplomacy and commitment to shared global objectives.
Addressing the underlying societal issues that contributes to political polarization is essential. Efforts to reduce economic inequality, improve education, and promote social cohesion can alleviate the fears and resentment that fuel the divisive politics. Policies that foster inclusive growth and opportunity strengthens democratic societies.
Donald Trump, as the 47th president, highlights potential challenges in domestic and international arenas, revealing the fragility of democratic institutions under populist movements that exploit societal divides. It raises concerns about the media's influence, the manipulation of public emotions, and the erosion of democratic norms. Internationally, shifting alliances, the emergence of global powers, and the lack of cohesive leadership complicate efforts to tackle global challenges. Yet, these difficulties also offer a chance for reflection, strengthening democratic institutions, and recommitting to the values of informed discourse and cooperation. Navigating this uncertain path requires collective effort, resilience, and dedication to democracy and peace, ensuring a future rooted in these essential principles.